Hello and welcome to the second episode of Buzz and Content Conversations. Before I begin the session, I would like to pray for everybody's safety. I know the entire country is going through its toughest period it has ever witnessed, where most of us have lost someone either known or really close. But let us remain mentally strong and give it just a good fight. I know it's not easy for us to work in such situations and try to live a normal life. We have been doing this for a year now, but things have only got worse. But I think we are by birth human beings are go-getters. Like always, I think I know we often use the statement, this shall too pass and life must move on. So let's hope for the best. I am Akanksha Srivastava from Buzzin Content, and I welcome all our panelists and the audience to a second content conversation session. It's a monthly IP that Buzzin Content has come up with, where content marketing practitioners come up with solutions, talk about interesting topics around content marketing, branded content, and influencer marketing. Uh, Today, we have an interesting topic, content and culture. The panelists of today's session are Hamsini Shivkumar, a very senior and rare semiotician and the founder of Leapfrog Strategy Consulting, Karthik Nagarajan, Chief Content Officer, Wavemaker India, and Head of Content at Group M India. He's one of the star thought leaders when it comes to promoting content marketing in India. We also have with us Savita Pai, Chief Digital and Media Officer, DIGO India. Not just in the Alcobif category, but a few of DIGO's content initiatives have set a high standard for others to follow. I also welcome Sajni Masturlal, head of content at WakeFit. In no time, WakeFit has disrupted the sleep solution industry through its cutting edge content. In fact, I'm one of those people who have ended up buying WakeFit product because I love their content. I love how they have been really consistent in creating impressive content. Uh, so in September last year, we launched a weekly series in the form of a section on a platform, Content and Culture, where Hamsini analyzes interesting content pieces done by brands in terms of their cultural relevance. Buzz and Content is the only news platform that has a weekly analytical column through the lens of culture and semiotics. And I am really proud of that. The series has received tremendous positive response from our readers. So, how can brands leverage popular culture and create content? It's a rarely touched upon topic. Hence, we thought of bringing together a group of thought leaders who are experts in leveraging popular culture to create content that resonates with the audience. While brands have been conscious of what they create, it has become even more important to create content that humanizes them and matches the ethos of the target audience. The consumers notice every little detail of any content. Culture affects how somebody thinks, reacts, and processes information. Knowing and understanding the culture specific aspects of a target audience will help you meet their expectations. If our audience has any question to ask, they can either comment on a Facebook Live right now on a page or write to us at info@bestmediainfo.com, and I will ensure that our esteemed panelists answer those questions. So let me begin with Hamsini. Hamsini, what is semiotics and what role does it play in content marketing?
Semiotics is actually the study of signs and symbols and narratives for their implicit or hidden or deeper meaning. So it is a discipline actually with many parts and to it. So it's a theoretical. So it has theory, it has frameworks, it has tools, much like other disciplines have, like sociology or anthropology or any of those. But this is a sort of intersection discipline because it sits at the intersection of linguistics and language, philosophy and anthropology. So it sort of touches upon all things because signs, we are homo signans, we are sign creators, sign interpreters from maybe almost from birth. And we just get more and more sophisticated at both creating and interpreting signs and symbols as we go along. And we create very complex significatory systems through art, through music, through literature, through content, through all of these things. So semiotics, the knowledge of semiotics helps you decode and understand and unpeel all the layers of meaning that could be embedded in any piece of content or set of such material, which semioticians call texts. How or is semiotics relevant for content creation and content evaluation? So I'll kind of break it into two parts. I'll start with content evaluation maybe. So, I spent many years in advertising. I used to head planning at JWT. I spent 14 years in planning. So, when we think of the term evaluation, typically we think in terms of consumer behavior and various metrics and measurements and ROI. So that is definitely one kind of evaluation that is required in business. But there is another kind of evaluation. We could call it evaluation, but I call it a type of learning, deeper learning, which practitioners sort of engage in. So if you asked a question like, how does our humor content compare to other kinds of humor content? And how is it really constructed? What is it really saying? How can we make it even better? So it's for that kind of learning that semiotics as critique can be very useful, much like film criticism or literary criticism and all that, where critique is taken quite seriously. But in terms of the creation process, that is before the whole thing begins in content strategy, I haven't yet done such work, I must confess, but extrapolating from my experience in advertising and in planning and planners and communication strategy in general, I would say that semiotics can help in two ways. One is, if you want to know what really connects with your audience, it's easier to get there by looking at a range of content that if you have evidence which says that my audience loves watching all of these kinds of things, and a semiotician can decode it to figure out what is it in it that really connects with them and creates that engagement. So audience is one area. The other is actually this understanding of culture through the semiotic lens and meaning making lens. So then we'd be able to understand, or okay, like for example, I want to use a celebrity and insight into fan culture so that I can use celebrities differently in my content. So semiotics can help you do that kind of thing. Understand, let's say, fan culture, or is there a culture around sleep, or what is romance in our culture? Those kinds of things. So it can get you a more rigorous understanding of it, because we will look at a whole range of texts. Because being members of a culture and creative people are automatically highly observant of culture and what is happening around them. So they, of course, we all have our own view and take, and creative people are also very sensitive to lots of details and nuance and all of that. Not taking away from any of that, but it can certainly bring some rigor into that understanding of culture. So that's really what my point of view is.
Kancha, you're on mute.
Yeah, I was saying, why not many people in India have chosen this profession, semiotician, like you are? I don't see many people in India who are semioticians.
That question is addressed to me. Well, the problem is it's very hard to learn it. There are very few universities or places that offer those courses. In India, well, MICA has one introductory course in semiotics. I now teach a course at SIMC. But even internationally, it's usually taught as part of another course. So like if you go to do a PhD or a course in media studies, for example, you will have one or two courses on semiotics. But it's not very easy to study it formally. A lot of people are interested because it's quite fascinating, because it studies culture and it studies human behavior, but in a very different way. People are quite fascinated by it, but it's hard to learn it. That's the problem. That's why there are very few semioticians formally. It's taken me almost 10 years from where I began to where I have reached now, just by doing projects, reading, because I also co-own SemioFest, which is the global platform for applied semioticians from all around the world. So we do an annual conference every year in some part of the world or the other. So that journey has been long, and that's the challenge, actually.
So Karthik, my next question is to you. What kind of conversations do you hear among agency people and brands related to semiotics and understanding of culture and creation of content? Is it a silent territory, or brands are aware of its importance in creating content?
So before that, I absolutely love how Hamsini, defined it, and I'm going to try and see if I can get myself a seat in that SIMC course. I would love to hear more about this from her. To your point, no, Kancha, I feel like it is almost at the base of every discussion that we are having. I firmly believe that content is a cultural intervention, right? Whichever way you look at it, and that's what it is. And you cannot do that unless you are an insider to the culture. Right? Either you're an insider by yourself as a creator, or you're an insider by knowing the audience truth. Right? So unless you're able to dissect the culture and understand what it is, and like Hamsini said, what it is that connects something to someone, you will never be able to make that intervention in a credible manner. But I don't think, at least in the content industry, we call it out as semiotics, and then we sort of appreciate it at that level. Um, like for example, what we did about a year and a half back is, we created something called Culturescape. Right? We realized that a lot of clients coming to us are asking questions like, okay, how do I own music, right? Or one of the campaigns that we're extremely proud to be associated with, which is Tata Tea Jagore, which is how do you own pre-activism, right? How do I understand what it is that is the need gap in terms of rights or in terms of freedom issues, and how do we sort of, from an pre-activism perspective, sort of go ahead and own that. Or when we try and say, hey, I'm a luxury brand, how can I sort of own that? All of them in a way are deconstructing the culture associated with that, right? So when we launched Culturescape, it was basically just this, getting our hands on all the different data points which reveal the consumer truth to us, and then starting the creative journey from there. So that's the big relevance to what we do.
Okay. So, do you think the way Wavemaker focuses on understanding cultural relevance, it's a scenario across the agencies in India, or it's just the agencies which are highly focused on content creation, just like yours? What's your take here?
Um, I'm going to ignore the opportunity to plug Waymaker that you provided, which I'm not going to do. But I see. I think a lot of people do it intuitively. Um, I think there are a lot of agencies, who we compete with, whose work I'm extremely proud of. Right. So a lot of people do it intuitively, and I think they're able to do it intuitively because they probably have a lot of people who are insiders to that culture. Right. Whether you're a gamer or whether you're a musician, the beat, right? So you're able to sort of do that. I think we've sort of created a system that is not about the individual, but it is beyond the person, right? So that way it is more process led. And honestly, I think it's a bit of a fresh road. I wouldn't say that a lot of people have taken this road, because what happens is, at the end of the day, a great idea, a great content thought is the last mile is always a leap of faith, right? Data can only take you to that fantastic spot from which you can take that leap of faith, but it is a leap of faith, right? So it's difficult because you don't want to be tied down to data, because in some way that is also curtailing of the creative leap itself.
Okay, sure. So, my next question is to Savita. What is your view on how culture influences marketing strategies, and how has DIGO brought the study of culture and semiotics into practice?
Thanks for that question, Akanksha. Hi, everybody. Um, I think I liked what Hamsini said as well, so I'm going to build on that. We do work actually with a lot of cultural commentators, as well as do a lot of studies by our consumer insight and planning team to see how consumers are evolving, right? Because many times our brands, to a large extent, remain same for a few years at least, before we do what we call, some sort of rejig of, the brand. And we need to move along with consumers. And we also use a lot of semioticians, Hamsini, for your reference also, on how our product should look feel beyond, just the liquid itself, or beyond the intrinsics, in terms of what it means culturally today to for the consumers today. And of course, we have lots of iconic brands which have like the Johnny Walker Striding Man, which has been there for 150 plus years and so on, right? But even the way that the Striding Man has evolved over the years means something to the consumers of today, right? So we constantly do this study year on year to see what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, right? A quick one, I think, which everybody today would be talking about, is this term of millennials, which I know people use in whichever form, and it's understood sometimes very differently. But no matter what, however we define millennials and our consumers of today, who are above the legal drinking age and so on, we need to make sure that we are part of their life, because that is what the culture is. Us saying something about our brand is not culturally relevant, right? The place where they are today, what life stage they are in, what the environment they have, what they are experiencing, is very different from what their parents experience or their brothers experienced a few generations away. So it's very important now to say and feel and talk to them and make ourselves a part of their lives in the most relevant manner. So a quick example is something that we've done with Black and White, for example, one of our Scotch brands, where we saw that, and of course, this is all pre-COVID, so a couple of years back and so on, where the millennials always want new experiences, but they also feel like sharing it, right? It was a much more about a sharing experience of food and drink. And having, identified that, we had lots of programs, with some of our key outlets and partners, like, the Black and White Platters program. That's a perfect example of where we felt we were being part of where the consumers were, and enhancing their cultural experiences versus saying okay, we stand for this. And I think that's very important in today's day and age. And I think we're seeing a lot of people, even in the post-COVID world, evolving and making the right connections with the consumers. So we take it pretty seriously in terms of research being done and connecting appropriately.
It's very difficult for other brands to match the high standards that Diageo has set in when it comes to creating content and promoting it. In fact, I mean, I see all of your content pieces. You have been so consistent in among spreading the word around, not just in creating content for your brand, but being a thought leader of promoting content marketing in India. So I really appreciate that. I appreciate all the people who are the thought leaders of promoting content marketing in India in general. So my next question is for Sajani. Sajani, any content will only work if it's relatable to the people. One can gauge relatability only if they know their consumers well. One important factor that plays a role in helping brands creating relevant content is understanding of the consumer's environment, their culture, what they aspire to achieve, what visually attracts them. Nowadays, even audio formats would appeal to them. Still, I don't find many brands focusing on this aspect of content marketing. Is there some reason that you can attribute here, and what is the case at WakeFit?
At WakeFit, we strive to do different things always. So we always have verticals that we're kind of working on. We have a YouTube channel where we're always trying to create content based on the pulse of the society. So if it's the second wave, we're trying to plan a piece, that could kind of sum up what people are feeling. If there's a new year coming in, like at the end of 2020, we wanted to do something that kind of it didn't have anything to do with our product as such, but we wanted to sum up how most people have felt in the whole year. And this, I think, Corona has given us a really good chance to kind of bring everyone on the same page, because this is the first time, I think, in a lot of our lives where everybody across the globe is going through the same thing. Everybody now has to get used to a new way of working, a new way of staying at home. How do we make that better? And that's where we find our connect. How is it that we can make staying home easier, more relatable to our consumers. And I think luckily for us, we don't have a niche target audience. We have a very large base that we can just appeal to with a generalist theme of something. Like, we're not a Nike where we're targeting our content to runners or to sports people or to someone who we're appealing that you should work out. We're just talking about what it's like to be home. We're talking about being relevant in sleep. How does something help you with sleep? So we luckily been able to find a lot of these connectors that connect universally everybody. Everybody has a problem of finding time to sleep. Everybody has this problem of staying up because of work or staying up because of commutes. We're able to tap into that. We're able to tap into, okay, everybody, there's a lockdown, everybody's staying home. What is everyone going through? Everyone's going through the same thing. So I think Savita said something really interesting. It's about how people today really like to share things. And that's what we think about. That's the approach we kind of like to take. What is it that I'm likely to share? If I'm likely to share it, then probably, any other person is likely to share. But it has to resonate at that level. So I don't think it's always easy, and we don't get it right with all of our pieces maybe, but we're still able to kind of chase that consistently and say, we'll make an effort to make sure that we are creating content that reflects the pulse of the society at any given point of time. But that's like a dedicated effort that we have to keep making through the year. While we do our regular content that the brand needs, whether they're product feature videos, whether they're, TVCs or, trying to explain how our model works, we also put in as much effort in trying to think about how do we get people to kind of say, yeah, hey, Wakefit is saying something that I can relate to. So I think that's a constant effort that a brand has to take. And it's also a call that I think a lot of brands take in terms of building their personality as well. Will we have a say on this topical moment, or will we have a say on a certain time of the year, like IPL or festive or something like that? So just as brands do that, it's also a constant effort. Like, it's also a decision to make that effort to say that I will continue to month on month, week on week, day on day, with every kind of content, whether it's a social post, whether it's a campaign, whether it's a video that I just created or repurposed from something else. Does that fit in one of the verticals? And having those verticals itself, building the infrastructure to have those verticals, it takes a lot of bandwidth of a lot of people to be able to create content at that scale. So having that infrastructure, taking that call to say that, I want to be relevant, I want to be shareable, I want to have a say on something that's happening in society, that's important.
Sure. Hamsini, my next question is to you. Can you share with us one example where a brand went wrong when it came to understanding contemporary culture, and one example where they mastered the art?
Rather than sort of talk about one example of where brands have gone wrong, I would rather sort of I did actually look through we have now written some 34, 35 articles in content into culture. And before we write each, we probably study at least 4 or 5. So we have that many sort of content campaigns we have looked into. And I would broadly say that where we have found still big gaps or mistakes made by brands is when they sort of, in their minds, they are not able to let go of what you might call the advertising and sponsorship overhang. So they tend to see branded content to be equal to its advertising or sponsorship in another form or format. So what happens with that is then there's either very sort of overdo the visibility of the brand in whatever they produce. So then, there'll be packs everywhere in the background, or, the logo will be like, every other frame. So all these carryovers of advertising thinking and sponsor visibility, ROI thinking, they'll take on a celebrity or an influencer or let's say a stand-up comic, but then very quickly in the course of that video will convert them into a product salesman who's sort of pitching the product. So which are all things which content is not, right? And the third is, advertising visual language and storytelling style is by its definition because you're selling hope and positivity, right? First, you have to sell a product. And because you have to sell a product, you can't be very realistic in the way where it is in people's lives. So there is always advertising, always has a slightly hype, positive, soft lens around it, or everyday problems are sort of exaggerated to become life-threatening problems, i.e. like a young girl has a pimple and her whole life can collapse. So it sort of has these communication codes which have been very well established. If you sit and watch a reel of ads at any point, you can very quickly figure that out. But, for branded content to be effective, these things don't work at all. So if you make these sort of errors, right, where you are over visible, you push product or try to convert it into another kind of advertising selling, or you don't have a real, very grounded, real mirroring of culture, of the consumer or the audience's lived culture, then it really doesn't do well. And these are the three mistakes that we have found, top three mistakes that we have found, where people have gone off and wrong, and where they've done the material that which we have really appreciated and said wow for. Just as an overall broader sense, I would say that most of those marketers understand that content actually gives you a lot more scope for wider varieties of formats. So you don't have to be stuck in only making this long form, human interest story video, but you can actually do a whole range of things, right? From stand-up comedy to webisodes to web series to website plus or music videos. There are books and apps. So there's a wide range and variety of things that you can create. And these marketers are very well, content creators are aware of that. Secondly, they get the culture bit deeply because like Sajni and Savita and all have articulated it very well. They have in their minds shifted from being sellers to becoming publishers to actually thinking about their consumer, but not as a consumer, but as a human being who is anchored in a culture, who's anchored in a social group, who lives in a certain context. And then they're trying to connect with that human being in their context, in their own language, through their own, things that really resonate with them. So that is a shift that you have to make. And when we see the best examples, we see those which have, already made that shift. Like Wakefit, two of their work we have out of all of the reviews we wrote a whole piece on their Bhaad Mein Ja 2020 lovely Kawali video, which is so, it really connected because of how it captured the sentiment, but, made it much more lighthearted and funny and, all of that. So, which is what people were looking for, right? I want to look back and forget about it, but, but to do it in a very nice way. And then there are many other examples that we found, like Car Dekho takes a stance where they kind of support the elderly, a group who are hardly seen in car advertising or associated with cars as a category at all. So they've picked a different group and, kind of use them interestingly. Or Asian Paints, their whole series of beautiful homes where, the celebrity fan culture, it's like celebrities, how do you use celebrities differently? Is it at all possible, since they are the most overused category of people in Indian communication in general? But nevertheless, they found a new way to sort of connect fans and celebrities, right? Because they thought about fan culture. I'm thinking, maybe they did, I don't know. But that's how it comes across to me. So they were able to build that bridge by saying, okay, you know what, fans are hungry to know more and get closer to their celebrities in every possible way. So let's get them into the home of a celebrity and make the celebrity himself sort of give like a walkthrough tour of their home while talking to their fans. Amazing. It's a simple idea, but very well done. But it really talks to that aspect. So there are many examples. Zivame did one where they used comedy to talk about issues of ill-fitting innerwear. But they make light, but it's very real because it's done in a true stand-up comic way and not in a advertising. So that's really what I would say. So they mirror cultural truths. They are very real, realistic, and they don't confuse branded content with either advertising or sponsorship.
So, my next question is kind of to everybody, and this has come from what Hamsini has said. I just wanted to understand what goes behind in the marketer's mind when they try to push their brand in content. Because, these conversations have been forever on that if you want to produce good content, don't push your brand too much onto the face of the consumer. So why is it still happening? And whoever would want to answer this question, if they know what goes behind their mind, what goes in their mind.
Actually, Akansha, can I answer this by actually asking a question to Hamsini, which also I'll be very, very curious to know what she feels is. You're talking about what goes on in a marketer's mind. And before this, we were talking about what brands do right and wrong. So I have this question. There are some brands which wake up one fine Wednesday and then decide that they're now going to champion this cause, right? Like they're going to now become the champions of the entire transgender movement or anything else without having any precedence or doing anything on ground to support it at a grassroots level or anything like that, right? I want to know what do you I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing. I think all saliency probably is a good thing. I don't know, but somehow to me it always sticks out as largely fake. Like, but how do you perceive that? There is a certain good in it. I think any amount of conversation around these issues is probably good. But how do you see it?
See, I don't think one thing I want to say is participating in culture doesn't mean that you become a cause marketer or activist. Activism and cause marketing is not necessarily, for all brands, and nor do you really have to become an activist to talk about things which are broadly connected to your area where you're in. But to expediency, jumping on to some cause because you now decide that's what you want to do, it can come across as fake, as you said. But I think you, at the same time, like if you don't have a history of participation in a particular area, but you now decide you want to, you can still be credible if you decide to be consistent and you do both acts and communication, right? So if you are only communication, it can be far more process just opportunistic. But you have to do acts and not just ads. Then you can build credibility if you decide to adopt this course from today on.
Right.
Okay. And what about my question that why are brands still doing it even after they know that it's bad content if they push the brand too much into it? I know Savita must not be doing it because Diageo to बहुत ही amazing content बनाता है. In fact, Sajni also. But you guys are from the other side, like from the marketers side, who are the ones who are spending money on creating content. And I know there's always this urge, I should show my brand. कहीं ना कहीं तो urge होता है. So what do you think about it? What is in their mind that they push their content brand slightly into content? Any idea?
I think the main idea is that if it's a good piece of content, well, I'm assuming that the marketers who want to put them out, they feel like it's good content and they want their name to be associated with it, and I'm guilty of it as well, to make sure that the logo is the right place. There's something even in Bhad Mein Ja, a person can't really look at it and say that hey, it's a Wakefit video or it's not, but I'm just as guilty at that time to say that hey, there's got to be the mattress that on which Qawwalis are sitting, it's got to have a label over there. But I mean, like I've also been from an agency side where, you know, I've had clients all my life say, logo ko bada karo, logo ko bada karo. So I think it has to be of a balance. I don't know why people go over and above doing what's probably required, but I think that's maybe the judge of a good marketer, if you're able to balance showing your logo, but also be creative enough to create content that probably doesn't need an introduction at the end of it. People can just see it and say, like you are saying that, you know, Diageo has content that's it's just good. It has its own character, and when you look at it, you know that it's coming from a certain caliber and a certain kind of company that reflects its culture. So sometimes I think brands do a good enough job of reflecting their personality, and that's good enough. But sometimes I guess for newer brands or brands that are not as well known, there might be that urge to, you know, label everywhere.
Sure. Savita, do you have something to add, or I should just move on?
Frankly, it's a hard job to balance everything. So, as I think Sajni also said that time, I mean, everybody has a learning curve, and there are lots of debates on, you know, what how are you really meeting the cultural nuances, and what's the right balance, and, you know, how much to do and how much not to do. So yeah, I don't want to go into all the maybe 35, 40, which Hapsini has already looked at, but it is a hard balance. It's the day job of a lot of people to ensure that, you know, the dots are connected, right, from the consumer to you participating in it, and then, you know, talking the same language with it seeming natural in place, and therefore connecting, you know, rightly with everybody's thoughts, aspirations, where they are in their lives. It's difficult, and yes, people get it right, wrong. I'm sure we have also lots of learnings from our past experience. So yeah, all it's a joyful job on that end, but also takes a lot of effort to ensure that, yes, as that distance here comes from the right place, is pretty much in sync with what your ethos is, and how you participate in culture, right? So I'll leave it at that. Absolutely, I don't want to comment on how many things everybody's got, you know, right and wrong.
Sure. Karthik, do you think brands and agencies should have specific teams, or even a person whose job should only be to provide marketing team with cultural and semiotic insights?
No, the answer is an absolute yes. And I think today, I sometimes just sit back and just look at it, right? Like just 7, 8 years back, and I come from a measurement background. Right? 7, 8 years back, we used to talk to brands about, hey, do you know this thing called social listening, and do you know how you can use it, and all of that, right? But today, I can't think of a single client that I know of who already doesn't, either through the agency or themselves, um, doesn't have a year on the ground in terms of what is the cultural reality, the cultural insights, whether it is about their brand or competition. But the answer is absolutely yes. There should certainly be, um, I think cultural insights is as important an audience insight as anything else, especially if content is important for your journey overall.
So, Wavemaker has somebody specific to look into it for brands?
We have an army. Like I said, like the whole thing I was speaking to you about as Culturescape um, uh, is really specialists in semiotics, specialists in research, insights, specialists in understanding the cultural nuance, both from a numbers perspective as well as from a qualitative perspective. Right? So I've at least seen very very few content outfits which invests as much in in this part of it as we do. Right? So hence, from that perspective, very, very happy with where we are.
Okay. So one of our viewer has asked Karthik's comment on the discussion that we were having before. It's Raju Nair says that guess the devil is ROI delivery.
This is in perspective in relation to which part of the conversation? So I didn't catch that.
This is in perspective to why brands try to push their.
No, absolutely. I really loved what Savita was saying about this, and I feel one of the biggest thing that we probably don't think is as important is time. Right? Sometimes we know what is the right thing to do, but there is also this other thing that okay, you need to move fast and break things as well, whether it is coming from you yourself or from the client or from the moment. So we sort of don't discuss that as much with as much vigor as we discuss culture and insight and semiotics. So that is a very real thing. That so there are. I'm pretty sure that everybody who's watching this or everybody on the panel, we're all at some point have done something because we needed to do it. It needed to be done, and we've not been 100% happy with the way we did it.
Sure, and as Savita said, that it's a journey. It's everybody make mistakes and learn from it and move on.
Absolutely, yes.
Savita, my next question is to you. That while data and creativity have forever been the talk of the town, how does one begin his journey of amalgamating study of culture and semiotics in regular marketing practices? What is the process, and what are the things to be kept in mind here?
I don't want to repeat many of the things which already a lot of the panelists have said, but I think it's important to bring in 2-3 things, right? One is the cultural insights, cultural insights, consumer insights, right? I'm separating the two for a moment. And then, where your category or where your brand is, right? So eventually the choices that you have to make with all of this, data or what you're observing through whether it's research, quantitative, qualitative, whichever way it is, it comes down to what makes sense to, communicate to the consumer and the legitimacy of your brands and where they stand, right? Because there may be a lot of moments out there which you feel are awesomely connected to culture, and but the decision of whether to participate in it or not, your brand also needs to be in a space where it comes across as legitimate and sincere, right? So you have to make these choices, and sometimes your brand may not be in a place, and that's also a choice to make. What not to do is sometimes as important as what you can play in. And I think it's a narrow space. Sometimes you have a set of things, may not be as broad. For it to be consistent, as you said before, it needs to talk the same language and evolve with the consumer, but continue building on the same language that you have that you've been in through the past as well. So to connect all of these things together makes it very, very important. And one of the examples, for instance, which we've had in the past has been something which we've done over the years of signature masterclass, where we've seen how consumers today don't necessarily relate to celebrities in just one way, holding them in awe or something like that, but want to know what it is about their life journey that they can apply to their own. So it's not just budding actors who are looking at some of these top actors, but they're almost looking at, say, for instance, what can we learn from their journey, which today, as a software engineer today, that I'm building on my life, and where is that connect, which makes me love and adore that person, for example. So to make it, so we had the signature masterclass where it was about life stages of these people and what they went through, right, to make it a conversation with a lot of the audiences. And I think those things have connected with our consumers over the years. That's just one example, and again that has evolved over the years. The Shape It signature masterclass was 5 years ago, is different from what it was, I think, in about a year ago. and the type of people whom we feel connect with the consumers has evolved over time. Just one example of what we have done to bring this to life.
Sure. So another viewer, Mads Muck, please excuse me if I'm pronouncing it wrong. He says that how do you view India today in terms of practical application of semiotics in marketing? And I guess Hamsini can answer this question.
Very early stages or nascent market is what I would say. Not enough people know about it, and there are not enough practitioners. So it's very early days. Maybe in 10 years' time, it'll become a lot more widespread. But having said that, it's like Karthik said, there is intuitive understanding, and then there is more formal, polished, structured understanding. So the intuitive understanding we all have, the structured sort of understanding, there is a journey to be traveled for sure.
Sure. Okay. Sajni, we have talked enough about understanding the culture of the consumers to market content. I wanted to understand from you that how can a company's culture can be used as a marketing tool?
I think that becomes a part of your ethos in terms of your brand personality again. As a company, we are very driven by innovation, research, making sure that our products, as good as they are, like the quality, the science that goes behind it, is also affordable. So we try to make, similarly how we develop our products, we also try to bring that same level of intensive research, intensive um, intensive communication about the science aspect of it into our content as well. So very often if we are doing pieces of communication, while I think the entertainment pieces can be on one side, but our other products, other communication related to products will always be talking about how we can simplify the science for a consumer. And that's something we do internally as well, and I think that comes out in our content. So our first brand campaign had a sheep that was trying to talk to people about the layers that were there in our mattress. We also do a lot of content that helps people sleep better. So we do podcasts, we try to find out what is the beats per second that somebody should be listening to for them to want to feel sleepy. So we try to bring that in everything we do, and therefore put in some sort of meaning or some sort of purpose or some sort of direction in what we're creating. And I think that largely comes from the culture of the organization.
So, Sajni, Sumit Anand, a viewer, says that, pardon me for saying this on a content platform, but as the cliche goes, consistency trumps content. Do you have something to say here?
I would
You
want
be
to
consistent
understand
in
more.
content also, no?
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I was like, the perspective
If
of
you just
consistency.
something to ask. Okay, I guess I'll move ahead with the Tatha Ghata Chatterjee's question is to Hamsini. Do you think there is a strong connection between semiotics and behavioral sciences? In what way?
Okay. My understanding is that it's quite difficult to connect the two because behavioral sciences starts with behavior, which is at the end point of what people do, and it's always coming from the perspective of the individual and moving the individual to do A or B. So it comes from that last mile behavior and tries to figure out, go back. Semiotics actually approaches the whole perspective the other way, which is it looks at the larger picture of what's in people's minds, why is it the way it is, what role does culture have to play in it, or is it about language, etc. So semiotic studies much more of what you may call the collective imaginary, the conceptual mind space, these type of things. And from there it goes, you filter down, 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 and you kind of come into behavior. So both disciplines are useful, and nowadays they are sort of spoken about in in equal measure as disciplines, because they are newer in the marketing research space compared to conventional qual and quant research, which is very well known. But in my experience and in my understanding of both disciplines, it's quite hard to marry the two together.
Uh, I'm so sorry. He is Tathagat Chatterjee. I'm so sorry for pronouncing his name wrong here. Uh, Coming to my next, uh, is there something that anybody would want to add in this conversation? And I haven't asked, but it's an important point when it comes to understanding culture, putting into use, putting into execution while creating content. Is there?
Akash, if you don't mind, I have a question for both Savita and Sajni. Can I?
Sure, sure.
Sajni, you spoke about podcast briefly, but today I think one way of looking at it is, and I'm sorry, I'm being selfish and asking this as a podcast host only. Um, today when you look at this as a medium, right? It seems like a lot of the cultural insiders, in one way or the other, are creators of podcasts and hosts, right? Like how do you see this medium? And of course, the constant cliche response to this is also that yes, it's not at scale. We haven't really reached the levels with video that we have with audio today. But how do you see it as a tool for starting a cultural conversation or an intervention? Whoever wants to go first.
I could go. I think it's a very powerful tool, and we've only done one exercise with podcasts, and I think that that's something that I'd want to probably focus on some more as well. But I think that it has a tremendous amount of potential just in the way that our electronic gadget device ecosystem is also kind of evolving, and how India is also growing into that. There are, I would say, I think at least for Wakefit, we probably need to figure out what is the best format that works for it, whether it's, a chat host, a chat and, a conversation about it, about a certain topic, whether it's music like we've tried before, whether it's somebody telling a story. So I think we still have quite a long journey to kind of go for me to gain authority on it yet. But I definitely do think that there is a lot of potential.
Got it. Savita, how do you feel about it?
Okay, that's a tough one. So I don't know whether I have too much to add. I think to what Sajni says. So I think I will put this one out. It's a I mean, being in our from our industry, I think it's a lot. It's very building the cultural connections itself becomes a very important, but very hard also. So therefore, I think I'll put this one out.
Sorry, no worries.
So my take on this audio platform and podcasts is that I think there are more people who are interested in being a podcaster. I'm not sure how many people, an audience, and on the listener's side, whether it has the same resonance. I think a lot of people are interested.
You feel that way?
Karthik is an amazing podcaster. He has some great following.
No, but point I was trying to make is actually, Hamsini, that used to be pretty much the case. You're absolutely right. But
maybe it was the case a year ago, and now things have changed drastically. One more of the digital shifts caused by COVID.
It's safe to say today probably we are somewhere between 20 to 30 million people who listen to at least an episode in a month. Right? Let's put it as that way. But yeah, you're right from a perspective that
20 to 30 million listening in a month is like 2 crore, 3 crore listeners in a month.
It's pretty much where Facebook was in 2015.
Yeah.
Or 2014. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I think in
Quite
podcasting, I
amazing.
think consistency is the key.
Mm.
You have to be regular.
Yeah.
So I think we had this amazing session today. I got to learn again a lot from all of you. Thank you for sparing your time for this really insightful session. This engaging session was actually a break from the stress we all are going through. I was not in a good mood for more than a week now. Thank you so much, guys. I pray for everybody's well being. Stay safe, stay at home, wear mask while maintaining social distancing. Thank you again. Thank you, viewers. Let's meet next month.
Yes.
Take care,
Thank
everyone.
you. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so
Bye.
much. Yeah. Bye.
Everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.